The plastic chair in the community room of Sunny Pines Assisted Living was as uncomfortable as it was ugly molded beige plastic that dug into my lower back and offered no relief for my arthritic hip. But I hardly noticed the discomfort as I stared at the small television mounted on the wall where a news anchor was announcing the winning Powerball numbers with practiced enthusiasm. And tonight's Powerball jackpot of $347 million goes to the lucky ticket holder with the numbers 8/17/23, 46/53, and Powerball 14. My hands trembled as I looked down at the ticket clutched between my fingers. I'd been buying the same numbers every Wednesday for 30 years. Frank's birthday. Our anniversary date, the ages of our son. When he graduated high school and college, the year we bought our house, and the number of the classroom where I taught third graders for nearly 3 decades. For 30 years, those numbers had yielded nothing more than a few small wins and the pleasant ritual of shared hope. Until now, I traced each number with my fingertip, matching them one by one with what was displayed on the screen. All 6, a perfect match. My heart hammered against my ribs as the reality sank in. I, Martha Sullivan, 78-year-old widow and unwilling resident of Sunny Pines Assisted Living Facility, had just won $347 million. As if on cue, my phone rang. My son. Thomas's name flashed on the screen, a rare enough occurrence these days to be notable on its own. Mom. His voice had a warmth I hadn't heard in months. We were just thinking Vanessa and I believe it might be time to reconsider your living situation. Perhaps you could come home for a while. Home. The word hung in the air like a cruel joke. The home he and Vanessa had been so eager to sell out from under me. The home they'd removed me from 3 months ago with talk of safety concerns and professional care, after one minor fall that had resulted in nothing more than a bruised knee. I remembered Thomas's exact words the day they'd brought me to Sunny Pines. Mom, you can't take care of yourself anymore. This is for your own good. I looked down at the lottery ticket again. A slow smile spread across my face as I hit the end call button without responding. For my own good. Indeed, I'd been a widow for 5 years when Thomas and Vanessa decided I could no longer live independently. My husband Frank had died of pancreatic cancer, a mercifully quick but unbearably painful end to our 50-year marriage. After his death, I'd continued living in our Portland home, the modest but beautiful craftsman we'd purchased when Thomas was just a baby. The neighborhood had gentrified over the decades, transforming from a working-class area to one of the most desirable postal codes in the city. That increasing value hadn't escaped Thomas and Vanessa's notice. As a bank executive and high-end real estate agent, respectively, they knew exactly what my paid-off, well-maintained home in a prime location was worth. You're rattling around in that big house all by yourself, Mom, Thomas would say during his increasingly infrequent visits. Wouldn't you be happier somewhere more manageable? I'd always rebuffed these suggestions. I was managing just fine. My mind was sharp, my body still relatively cooperative, despite the normal indignities of aging. I had friends in the neighborhood, a garden I loved, and memories in every corner of the home where Frank and I had built our life together. Then came the fall. One rainy morning in March, I slipped on a wet porch step while bringing in the newspaper. The result was a bruised knee and a slightly sprained wrist. Nothing that wouldn't heal in a couple of weeks. But when Thomas found out, courtesy of my well-meaning but loose-lipped neighbor, it became the excuse he'd been waiting for. Suddenly, there were concerned visits from Thomas and Vanessa. There were whispered conversations with my doctor, a man 30 years my junior who'd been seeing me for all of 2 years. There were brochures for senior living communities left conspicuously on my coffee table. When I continued to resist, things escalated. Thomas brought a geriatric specialist to the house, a colleague of Vanessa's cousin I later discovered, who asked me pointed questions, clearly designed to expose deficiencies. What day was it? Who was the president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered everything correctly, but it didn't matter. The specialist noted that I seemed slightly confused and potentially at risk for cognitive decline. He recommended a more structured environment with professional oversight. The final blow came after I'd taken the anti-anxiety medication the doctor had prescribed medication I didn't need, but agreed to try, when Thomas insisted it would help me accept the transition. In my sedated state, I apparently signed papers I didn't remember. Papers that granted Thomas power of attorney and authorized my transfer to Sunny Pines. I woke up the next morning in a strange bed in a room half the size of my master bathroom, with a nurse cheerfully explaining the breakfast schedule and medication protocols. My first months at Sunny Pines were a blur of disbelief, anger, and grief. The facility wasn't terrible. It was clean, adequately staffed, and offered various activities to keep its residents occupied. But it wasn't home. It wasn't my choice. And as the fog of confusion lifted, I realized just how thoroughly I'd been manipulated by the people who were supposed to love me most. Thomas sold most of my belongings in an estate sale I wasn't allowed to attend. "It's better this way, Mom," he'd said when I protested. "A clean break. Besides, you don't have room for all that stuff here." Stuff. A lifetime of carefully collected treasures, family heirlooms and personal mementos reduced to stuff that was inconvenient to store. He visited regularly at first every weekend for the first month, then every other weekend, then monthly. Each time he'd bring Vanessa, who would spend the entire visit checking her phone and making thin-lipped attempts at conversation. They'd stay for exactly 1 hour, then make excuses about Thomas's work commitments or their social obligations. During one such visit, I overheard them in the hallway outside my room. "The realtor thinks we can get at least $750 for the house, maybe more, with a few updates." Vanessa was saying, "If we list in spring when the garden is blooming, it could push us over $800,000. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Thomas replied. "We still need to clear out the rest of the furniture and repaint. That wallpaper in the dining room has to go." The wallpaper Frank and I had carefully selected on our 25th anniversary, the furniture that had witnessed family dinners, Christmas mornings, quiet evenings reading by the fire. I said nothing when they re-entered the room. What was the point? I had no legal recourse, no allies, no way to stop the systematic erasure of my former life. My only consolation came from unexpected quarters. Grace Chen, my reluctant roommate, initially seemed as unhappy about our shared circumstances as I was. A retired librarian whose children had moved her into Sunny Pines after a minor stroke, Grace had a sharp tongue and sharper mind. Our first weeks together were a careful dance of territorial boundaries and minimal conversation. Then one evening she caught me crying quietly after a particularly painful call with Thomas, during which he'd informed me he'd sold my piano, the piano Frank had surprised me with on our 10th anniversary, the piano I taught Thomas to play on. "They think we're already dead," Grace said matter-of-factly, handing me a tissue. "Our children, they pack us away and divvy up our belongings like we're already gone." Her bluntness startled a laugh out of me despite my tears. That's exactly how it feels. "My son David put me here after my stroke," she continued, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Said it was temporary, just until I regained my strength. That was 14 months ago. Now he has excuses every time I ask about going home. The latest is that my house has foundation problems that make it unsafe for a woman my age." Thomas said I was a fall risk after I slipped on a wet step. I offered one bruised knee, and suddenly I'm incapable of independent living. Grace snorted. "Meanwhile, that nurse Sophia tells me he calls once a week to ask about your mental status. He's building a case for cognitive decline so he can get full guardianship." I felt sick. "How do you know that?" "Sophia likes me. I helped her study for her nursing certification. She thinks what they're doing to you is wrong." From that evening forward, Grace and I were allies in the strange institutional world we'd been relegated to. We shared meals, played cutthroat games of gin rummy, and swapped stories about our lives before Sunny Pines. I learned she'd been a civil rights activist in her youth, had raised 3 children as a single mother after her husband abandoned the family, and had earned her master's degree in library science at age 50. In Grace, I found not just a friend, but a co-conspirator. Together we began to push back against the infantilizing routines of the facility. We refused to participate in childish craft activities. We demanded to be allowed walks on the grounds without supervision. We befriended Alan Parker, an 80-year-old former attorney who offered quiet legal advice to residents concerned about their rights. My other unexpected ally was my granddaughter, Lily. At 19, she was in her first year at Portland State University and made time to visit me at least once a week, despite her parents' obvious disapproval. "Dad says you're better off here," she told me honestly during one visit. "But you seem the same to me, as you always have. Maybe a little sadder." "I am sad," I admitted. "I miss my home. I miss my independence." Lily nodded, her young face serious. "They're renovating the house Mom's talking about flipping it for a profit." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not content with removing me from my home, they were erasing my presence from it, entirely treating it as nothing more than an investment opportunity. That was when I started buying lottery tickets again. Frank and I had played the same numbers every week throughout our marriage. A harmless splurge of a few dollars for the pleasure of dreaming about what we'd do with winnings we never expected to materialize. After his death, I'd continued the tradition, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. At Sunny Pines, I had limited access to the outside world, but Lily was happy to purchase tickets for me during her visits. "It's like a connection to Grandpa," she said, understanding the sentiment behind the request. The day I won Lily had driven Grace and me to a nearby shopping center, an expedition that required multiple approvals from Sunny Pines administration and Thomas's reluctant permission. While Grace browsed the bookstore, I'd ask Lily to stop at the convenience store so I could purchase my weekly ticket. "Same numbers?" she'd asked with a smile. "Always," I'd replied, and now those same numbers, the ones that had yielded nothing but small dreams for 3 decades, had transformed my life in an instant. Grace was the first person I told, showing her the ticket with shaking hands after the evening news. "Confirmed the win, sweet Mercy," she whispered, eyes wide behind her glasses. "Martha, do you understand what this means?" I did. It meant freedom. It meant power. It meant the opportunity to reclaim what had been taken from me. But it also meant danger. If Thomas discovered my windfall before I'd secured my independence, he would use his power of attorney to control those funds as well. "We need to be strategic," Grace said, ever the pragmatist. "First thing tomorrow we talk to Alan. Then Sophia and Lily. We need a plan before anyone else finds out." Alan Parker had once specialized in elder law, and though retired for 15 years, his knowledge remained sharp. He listened carefully to my situation, examined the power of attorney documentation Thomas had filed, and identified several vulnerabilities. "This was executed while you were under the influence of prescribed sedatives," he noted, tapping the paper with a gnarled finger. "And there's no evidence of proper witnessing or notarization. It's challengeable, certainly." "What's my first step?" I asked. "An independent medical and cognitive assessment," he replied promptly, "preferably from a geriatric specialist with no connection to your son or his wife. Then a good attorney, I can recommend several. Finally secure the lottery ticket immediately. That's your leverage." Sophia Rodriguez, the kind-hearted nurse who had been monitoring my so-called condition for months, agreed to help. "I've been documenting your cognitive clarity since you arrived," she admitted. "I knew something wasn't right about your placement here." Lily was both shocked and delighted by the news. "Grandma, this is incredible, but we have to make sure Dad doesn't take control of your winnings." "That's where you come in, dear." I told her, "I need your help with transportation and communication until I can get out of here legally." Over the next 2 weeks, under the guise of regular visits and outings, my small team executed a careful plan. Lily drove me to appointments with an independent geriatric specialist who confirmed what I already knew: I was entirely capable of making my own decisions and living independently. Alan connected me with Barbara Winters, a sharp-minded attorney specializing in elder law who began the process of challenging Thomas's power of attorney. The lottery ticket was secured in a safe deposit box under Lily's name, a temporary measure until I could legally establish my right to claim the prize. Barbara also advised me on the possibility of claiming the winnings anonymously, a critical consideration given my vulnerable position. Throughout this flurry of clandestine activity, I maintained my usual routine at Sunny Pines. I attended meals, participated minimally in activities, and accepted Thomas's increasingly infrequent calls with practiced pleasantness. When he mentioned selling my house, I offered mild concern rather than the rage that actually burned inside me. "I think you'll get a good price in this market," I said, swallowing bile. "The neighborhood has become so desirable." "Don't worry about the details, Mom," he replied condescendingly. "Vanessa and I are handling everything. You just focus on settling in at Sunny Pines." "I am settled." I lied. "It's very structured here." 3 weeks after my win, Barbara confirmed what we had hoped the power of attorney Thomas had obtained was legally questionable at best, fraudulent at worst given the circumstances under which it was executed. With the independent medical assessment confirming my competence, we had grounds to petition for its immediate revocation. Moreover, Barbara had discovered that Thomas had already transferred significant funds from my personal accounts to joint accounts. He controlled a clear violation of his fiduciary duty even under a valid power of attorney. "We have enough to challenge his control," Barbara assured me. "But there's a cleaner solution if you're willing to be a bit theatrical." I smiled. I taught 3rd grade for 27 years. "Barbara, I can be theatrical when required." The plan was simple but effective. Barbara filed the legal paperwork to revoke Thomas's power of attorney and documented his financial improprieties for potential legal action. Simultaneously, she arranged for me to officially claim my lottery winnings, an event that would inevitably generate media attention despite our best efforts at anonymity. "Your son is about to discover that his elderly mother, whom he deemed incapable of caring for herself, is now one of the wealthiest individuals in Portland," Barbara said with professional satisfaction. "His reaction should be illuminating." She was right the day after I officially claimed my winnings. Having opted for the lump sum payout, which after taxes left me with approximately $167 million, my phone exploded with notifications. Thomas called 17 times in succession. Vanessa texted repeatedly, her messages growing increasingly frantic. "Martha, please call us immediately. Thomas is very concerned about you. We need to discuss your financial security. As your family, we want to protect you from those who might take advantage." The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. I let them stew for 24 hours, during which I finalized the paperwork for my release from Sunny Pines, secured a luxury apartment in a senior living community that emphasized independence, and in my most satisfying move, made an offer on my own house through an LLC Barbara had established on my behalf. Thomas and Vanessa arrived at Sunny Pines the following morning, without notice, clearly expecting to take control of the situation. They found me in the community room, calmly playing gin rummy with Grace while Alan observed Mom. Thomas's face was flushed with some combination of panic and excitement. "Why haven't you answered our calls? We've been worried sick." "Have you?" I replied mildly, laying down my cards. "Gin." Grace smirked as she tallied the score. "That's $57 you owe me, Martha. I'll add it to your tab." "Mom, we need to talk privately," Thomas insisted, glancing suspiciously at Grace and Alan. "About the lottery win, there are serious financial implications you might not understand." I raised an eyebrow. "I understand $167 million quite clearly, Thomas. I also understand fraudulent power of attorney, financial elder abuse and the consequences thereof. Which would you like to discuss first?" His face drained of color. Vanessa stepped forward, her professional smile firmly in place. "Martha, we're all so thrilled about your good fortune. As a family, we just want to make sure you're protected. There are many decisions to make. Already made. I interrupted, nodding to Alan, who handed me a folder. I removed several documents and laid them on the table, one by one. This is the court order revoking Thomas's power of attorney, effective immediately. This is documentation of my independent medical assessment, confirming I am fully competent to manage my own affairs. This is a cease and desist letter regarding the sale of my home, which is no longer on the market as of this morning. Thomas stared at the documents, visibly struggling to process this reversal of fortune. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We put the house on the market for your benefit. It sold this morning. I continued calmly, to Sullivan Heritage LLC, for $50,000 above your asking price, I believe. Vanessa gasped. That's impossible. I hadn't even finalized the listing. Apparently not impossible at all, I replied. The new owner was quite motivated. Who is Sullivan Heritage LLC? Thomas demanded. I smiled. I am. Or rather, it's a company owned by me, established to protect my assets, including my home, from those who might not have my best interests at heart. The silence that followed was profound. Thomas slumped into a chair, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. Vanessa remained standing, her perfect posture now seeming brittle rather than confident. You can't just... she began. I can, and I have. I cut her off. I'm checking out of Sunny Pines this afternoon. My new accommodations at the Highlands are ready for immediate occupancy. Grace will be joining me there next week in the adjoining apartment. Grace waved cheerfully. I've always wanted a view of Mount Hood. Thomas tried one last approach, his voice dropping to the concerned tone he'd used when convincing me to enter Sunny Pines. Mom, please, we were only trying to take care of you. After Dad died, you seemed so lost. We worried. If you had worried enough to ask what I wanted, instead of deciding what was convenient for you, we might not be here, I replied, my voice finally betraying some of the hurt I'd been carrying. You took my home, my belongings, my independence, all while claiming it was for my own good. You never once considered that I might know what was good for me better than you did. We made mistakes, he admitted, but we're still family. Surely now, with your financial situation changed, we can start fresh. I studied my son's face, searching for the little boy I had raised, the young man who had once shown such compassion and integrity. I wanted to see genuine remorse, some recognition of the pain he'd caused. Instead, I saw calculation, the same assessment of potential advantage I'd observed when he discussed selling my home. Family doesn't manipulate and control each other, Thomas. Family doesn't use power of attorney to drain bank accounts. Family doesn't sell treasured possessions without permission. I gathered my documents and stood up. I'm willing to rebuild our relationship, but it will be on new terms that recognize my autonomy and dignity. Thomas and Vanessa left Sunny Pines 30 minutes later, shell-shocked and empty-handed. As I watched them drive away, I felt not triumph, but a sad sort of clarity. Money hadn't created the rift in our family. It had merely exposed it, and money alone couldn't heal it. That would require something. Thomas hadn't yet demonstrated genuine respect. My departure from Sunny Pines was considerably warmer. Residents gathered to wish me well, many expressing vicarious satisfaction at my reversal of fortune. Sophia hugged me tightly, whispering, "You give us all hope, Mrs. Sullivan." Alan shook my hand formally before pulling me into a surprise embrace. You're changing the narrative, Martha. Remember that. This isn't just about you. It's about all of us who've been sidelined and silenced. Lily arrived to drive me to my new home, her car packed with the few possessions I'd been allowed to keep at Sunny Pines. I'm so proud of you, Grandma, she said as we pulled away. You fought back. My new apartment at the Highlands was everything. Sunny Pines was not spacious, personally decorated, and most importantly, my choice. With Barbara's help, I'd arranged to have it furnished before my arrival, selecting pieces that echoed the home I'd lost while still representing a fresh start. Over the following months, I settled into my new life with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Frank's death. I established the Sullivan Education Fund in Lily's name, providing scholarships for students studying elder care and advocacy. I joined a senior advocacy group that lobbied for stronger protections against elder abuse. I reconnected with old friends who had been kept away during my time at Sunny Pines. Grace moved into the adjoining apartment as planned, and our friendship deepened into a partnership of shared interests and complementary strengths. Alan became a frequent visitor, his legal expertise invaluable. As I navigated my new financial reality, Sophia left Sunny Pines to pursue her master's degree in gerontological nursing, supported by a scholarship from my foundation. My relationship with Thomas remained complicated. After several months of minimal contact, he reached out with a formal letter of apology professionally written, possibly by a lawyer, but a start nonetheless. I responded with an invitation to lunch at a neutral location without Vanessa. Our conversation was awkward, laden with unspoken recriminations and tentative olive branches. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said at last, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I convinced myself we were doing what was best for you." "What was convenient for you," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I understand that now I don't expect forgiveness." "Good, because I'm not quite there yet," I interrupted. "But I'm willing to work toward a new relationship if you are. One based on mutual respect." Our reconciliation was slow and sometimes painful. Thomas had to confront uncomfortable truths about his motivations and behavior. I had to acknowledge the fear of aging and loss that had partly driven my resistance to any change in my living situation. We were still finding our way back to each other, step by careful step. Vanessa and I maintained a polite distance, neither of us quite ready or willing to bridge the chasm between us. Lily, however, became a regular fixture in my new life, spending weekends at the Highlands and bringing friends to hear stories of my rebellion, as she called it. My house. My real house. The one filled with memories of Frank and our life together, stood empty for several months while I decided its fate. Ultimately, I chose not to move back. Too much had changed both in me and in my perception of that space. Instead, I renovated it thoughtfully and established it as a transitional home for seniors recovering from medical issues who needed temporary support before returning to independent living, a middle ground that hadn't been available to me. As for the lottery winnings, they provided security and comfort certainly, but their greatest value was in the freedom they returned to me, freedom that should never have been taken. In the first place, money was the tool that allowed me to reclaim my autonomy, but it was my own determination, supported by unexpected allies, that gave me the courage to use it. 1 year after my win, Grace and I sat on the balcony of our adjacent apartments, watching the sunset behind Mount Hood. We were planning a trip to Japan, the first stop on what we jokingly called our Late Bloomers World Tour. "Do you ever regret it?" Grace asked suddenly, challenging Thomas so directly. "He is your only child." I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that our relationship reached a point where monetary power was the only language he understood." I sipped my tea, watching the sky turn crimson and gold. "But I don't regret standing up for myself. For too long, aging has been treated as a surrender of autonomy rather than a continuation of life. If my small rebellion helps change that narrative even slightly, then every difficult moment was worth it." Grace nodded, understanding as always. "To late bloomers, then," she said, raising her teacup. I clinked my cup against hers. "And to unexpected second chances." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about the strange path that had led me here, from grief to vulnerability to exploitation, to unexpected empowerment. I thought about the plastic chair at Sunny Pines, where I'd sat when I discovered my win, and about Thomas's words that day. "This is for your own good." He had been wrong about what was good for me, But in a strange way, his actions had set in motion the events that led to this moment of genuine contentment. This sunset, this friendship, this reclaimed sense of purpose. Perhaps that was the most valuable lesson from this entire experience, that goodness and purpose can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, and that it's never too late to rewrite your own story. Even at 78, with a minor tendency to slip on wet porch steps, the next chapter remains unwritten, full of possibilities, limited only by imagination rather than others' expectations, for my own good indeed.